Good evening. So, Athens is the capital of Europe. Athens is the capital of Europe. Athens is the eternal capital of Europe, and it's not Jerusalem. Jerusalem is not the eternal capital of Europe and Europeans and European thinking or European culture. Athens is the capital of European culture, European architecture, European religion, Christianity. Athens is the birthplace of Christianity. How do I know this to be a fact? I know this to be 100% fact. At first, you would think that's not possible, but it actually is the truth. That Athens began, that Christianity began in Athens around 600 to 500 BC with Pythagoras and other philosophers. The whole line of philosophers of Pythagoras. It was Pythagoras, Heraclitus, Anaxagoras, Socrates, Plato, not necessarily in this order, Zeno of Citium, who was around 300 BC, and Aristotle. I think I said Socrates already. That whole line of philosophers is what produced Christianity. So Christianity actually started in Athens around 500 BC and spread east to Jerusalem, to Judea. And so the Essenes that you hear of Judea were that was a group of Stoics. So that was like the Greek Stoics of Athens were spreading around the world and into Judea as the Essenes. Now, the Judeans wrote the Bible in Greek. They wrote the Old Testament was rewritten. The entire all the laws of the Jews, they called them the law of the Jews, or the Torah, was written in Greek during the time of Ptolemy. And the New Testament was written in Greek because it was Greek. And so Greek culture went from Athens to Judea, from Athens to Judea. And the religion of Athens went from Athens to Judea. But it wasn't necessarily a religion, it was a philosophy. So the philosophy of Athens went from Athens to Judea as Christianity. It resulted in Christianity. I know this for an absolute fact. The main person who was the point of which it kind of synthesized the Greek philosophy with the Bible. Actually, it was Philo, but not just Philo, because everybody was already doing this anyway. And what they had done is they had said that this Greek philosophy of the Logos was what Moses had, and was what these other prophets of the Bible were talking about. The Logos is considered absolute, like the wisdom of God. That's what it means. Let's use this definition. The wisdom of God, the knowledge of God. Well, that's what Proverbs chapter 8, 23 describes. Proverbs chapter 8, 23, which is part of what they call the Old Testament. It's not part of the New Testament. It's part of the Old Testament. Describes the birth of wisdom as the first creation of God, which is literally the wisdom of God is the first creation of God, which is the Logos. So right there in Proverbs chapter 8, verse 23, we have the Logos. We have the wisdom of God. That's why those two religions came together in Christianity. But you have to understand, Christianity is Greek, and it comes from the Greeks. It comes from the Greeks. It's not Jewish. And so the reason I'm telling you this is because all of the European countries have been destroyed. And it took a long time. And the way it did that was because all the wisdom of the Greeks and the Chaldeans was wiped out. Because all this knowledge was being assembled by Ptolemy, the Greek king Ptolemy of Egypt, at the Library of Alexander. And that was destroyed at around the time, well, I don't know exactly what time that happened. But the other thing that happened is this. You had the Romans merge with certain Jews of Jewish aristocracy, and they merged with the Romans. That's what Flavius Josephus was. He was part of the Jewish aristocracy, he was part of a revolt against the Romans, but then he joined the Romans. right? And they joined the Romans, and eventually, at some point, they decided that this religion of the that had been developed by the Greco Jews of Christianity, it was a Greek religion or a Greek ideology that had taken off in Judea. That they were going to use this, the Romans were, they were going to use that as the new religion of Rome. And the problem is that it ended up perpetuating Judaism, because the original idea of Christ is that let me give you an example. Christ is called the Logos. Christ is called the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning of the end. So you don't need anything else. In other words, the Logos transcends all philosophies, all of man's religions, all of man's traditions. It fulfills them all, because it says that the wisdom of God is the Logos, is the ultimate truth. That the wisdom of God is the ultimate truth. Not something written in a book. It doesn't matter who wrote it or when, because the Logos transcends time. It transcends time. It transcends everything. So if you tap into the Logos, you don't need anything else. It fulfills all the prophecies of the Israelites. But this is an ideology that came out of Greece. You see, it came out of Athens. And so this was why the Greek Jews, I guess they were probably Jews who were basically like Greeks, or maybe they were mixed with Greeks. I don't know exactly, but the Greek Jews basically they had factions of Jews back then, and the Greek Jews said that the rabbis were killing the truth, and that the Logos was the truth, and the Logos was the Word of God. And all these traditions of the rabbis and all the interpretations of the rabbis were all meaningless. It doesn't matter. Now, is that where we are today? No, it's not. No, where we are today is all of Europe is now under Judaism. And we're constantly lectured about anti-Semitism. And let me give you an example. Here, let's listen to this Pakistani man who's now the Prime Minister of England. He's the Prime Minister of England, and he's the UK Prime Minister named Rishi Sunak. He's not British. He's either from Pakistan or maybe India. And this is how it is in all the UK governments right now are either from Pakistan or India. The Prime Minister of Ireland is from India, and he's a homosexual. He's a homosexual man from India, and he's ruling over Ireland. And he's calling the Irish people racists. And the Prime Minister of Scotland is, I think he's actually an Arab. And he's calling the Scottish people racists. And that's how it is in all of our countries. They call us racist, and they say that we're anti-Semitic because this whole system was set up through the Romans by Jews that had merged with the Romans 2,000 years ago. But here, listen to Rishi Sunak talk about anti-Semitism.
Are you condemning Elon Musk?
As I said, I condemn all anti-Semitism. Right? It's not about any one particular personality. I condemn anti-Semitism in all its forms.
He has a voice. He has a big platform, Prime Minister.
And as I said, I condemn anti-Semitism in all its forms. It doesn't matter whether you're Elon Musk or you're someone on the street who's shouting abuse at someone who happens to be walking past you. That's wrong in all its forms. Anti-Semitism in all its forms is completely and utterly wrong. And we have strong laws in place here to tackle racial hatred. People are inciting it. Some of the scenes we've seen have been unacceptable, and the police know that they should be using the full force of their powers to bring those people to justice.
So he's talking about using the police to go after people who are anti-Semitic in England, which is not a Semitic country. This is the problem. I personally don't have any problem with Jewish people, or people want to practice Judaism, or they are Jews or whatever. That's fine with me. You have to understand, though, you have to understand something, is that I'm not Jewish, and Europe isn't Jewish. Europe is not Semitic. The European races are not Semitic. They're not. And our capital, the capital of the European people is not Jerusalem. That's why when Donald Trump, who I supported, goes on and on about Jerusalem and he said and he moved the capital. He says the capital is Jerusalem. Well, who cares? It has nothing to do with the European races. We're not Semitic. The European races are not Semitic. But you know what? You know what else they call anti-Semitism? not wanting to kill Arabs who actually are Semitic. So just so everybody knows, the word Semitic actually is a reference to the sun. And in Arabic, the sun is called Shams. Shams. Shams is how we would spell it in English. So Shams, or in Hebrew, Aramaic, it's like Shemesh. Shemesh. And Shemesh in Babylonian, in the ancient Babylonian, is Shemesh means sun man. Shams, Shemesh is the sun man. The story of Samson is the story of the sun man. Samson, Shemesh, Shams. That's Samson, and so he grows his hair long and he gets cut off and he loses his power, and it's a sun myth, the story of Samson. But here's the point: the word sun in all the European languages is not the same as those languages because we're a different race. The European races are not the same as the Semites. So we need to have our own governments in Europe that are not Semitic because we're not Semites. And we deserve to have our own stuff. And that's why you could say it's anti-Semitic. You're like, oh, you just don't like Jews. No, it has nothing to do with that. I don't just not like Jews. That's not true. I just England's not Semite. Ireland's not Semite. Germany is not Semite. France is not Semite. Canada, America, like America is not Semite. America was founded by English people and French people. And in other words, everything doesn't have to be Semite. And so this is the weirdness of the people that are ruling over us in America and Europe, is they're trying to force us to be under Semitism, which is an ideology of the racial supremacy of the Semites. So it's very racist. I'm saying we're not Semites and that our capital is Athens. And why this whole Semitic system came into Europe, it came in through the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church brought the Semitism rule, the rule by Semitism, into that. Now, originally with Christianity, it was just supposed to be Christ alone, the Alpha, the Omega. The Logos alone is the object of veneration, even though it's not an object. It's the object of veneration is the truth, the Logos, the ultimate truth, God's word, because the Logos means the Logos in ancient Greek, actually what it really means is it means the prime thought or the how do I define it before? The governing principle of the universe. The governing principle. So there's an idea that the entire universe functions on. That all of natural law is based on certain laws, right? So the governing principle of the universe would be the natural law, which is the source of the governing how the universe moves through time, right? That's the governing principle. So that's an idea because it's a principle. That would be the Logos. But then the Logos would also be applied to creation and also applied to the human soul. And that's why the Stoics of Athens said that the way to happiness and living a happy life was to live in harmony with the natural order. Let me give you the exact quote from one of the Stoics here. Now, a Stoa is like here we go. Stoics of Athens. From 500 to 300 BC became the Essenes of Judea 100 BC. That's a quote from me. So here we go. It says here, this is Zeno of Citium. He was an old Stoic. A stoa is a raised platform with columns. Like, okay, it's a porch. So let's say you're outside on your porch, okay? And it's outdoors, but it's got a roof cover, and then there's a bunch of columns. So people would come into this porch area, and it would be covered, like a covered platform with those big Greek columns. And they would go in there and discuss the meaning of life and nature and creation, and they developed this philosophy. They were called the Stoics because they were in this big hall that was like partly outdoors, but next to a building, and it was covered with those big columns. So it was like there was an open, platform with big columns. So it was kind of outside, but it was covered. That's called a stoa. So they were the Stoics. So they were the people from the Stoa. And they were the ones that developed these philosophies. So it says here, Zeno of Citium. Peace of mind. Okay, he says happiness is a good flow of life. How is it achieved? Peace of mind that comes from living a life of virtue in accordance with reason and nature. Living a life of virtue in accordance with reason and nature. You see, we're getting into virtuous living, reason, the natural order. So this is what produced European civilization, nothing else. And this ideology of the logos, let me give you a logos quote. So here's another quote from Zeno of Citium, the founder of the Stoic school of philosophy in Athens between 336 and 265. So the philosophy in Athens actually started about 600 BC, but he was there between 300 and 200 BC time. And he said, he taught about the logos, which is an idea that came from around 500 BC, actually, which in this definition describes as universal reason. So you could say universal reason, the mind of God is actually a good way to put it, right? The mind of God. The mind of God is pure reason. You see, it's pure reason without any lies, but pure truth. So this is called the Logos. He said the Logos was the greatest good in life, and living in accordance with reason was the purpose of human life. So he says the purpose of human life is living in accordance with reason. So living in accordance with reason. Living in accordance with reason. In order to have real reason, proper logic, you have to be rooted in the truth. You can't have reason without truth. If you don't have truth as part of your equation, as part of your logical equation, you get lies, you get deception, you get an equation that doesn't make sense. It's not logical. It's illogical. So the truth is a prime ingredient in thinking. The truth is a prime ingredient in reason, in logic. You have to have the truth as the main ingredient. That is the Logos. That is the mind of God. This is Athens. So what happened is the philosophy of Athens goes into Judea, and then an allegory is formed by the Judeans, who were Greek philosophers of Judea, who said that the rabbis murder the Logos at the skull. They murder the Logos at the skull. They arrest the Logos, they torture the Logos, and they kill the Logos. And then the Logos is resurrected. And it's all along these old Israelite themes, right? It's all along these old Israelite themes. But it's the Logos. It's the truth. It's the ultimate truth. You see, that's why what the rabbis were teaching was the traditions of men, as Jesus called it. So do you need the Old Testament if you have the Logos? Why do you need all these other books if you have the Logos? You don't. When you have the Logos, you have everything. You have the Alpha and the Omega, and that's the religion. But if you notice now, you have all these Christians that are learning Hebrew, and they're going back to the Old Testament, and they're practicing Zionism, and they need to reclaim Jerusalem, and they need to exterminate all the Arabs, and it's like they're all being run by Talmudists. They're being run by the rabbis. Okay? So the way out of this trap, the way out of this horrible situation with Europe being systematically, ethnically, racially destroyed and replaced by foreigners. The Talmudists that run all these European capitals and that are calling everybody anti-Semites and replacing all the Europeans with people like Rishi Sunak and all these other foreign people that they're forcing on the Europeans to kill us. These people are all rooted in this Semitic ideology, right? And that they're trying to exterminate the white race. So the white race made the mistake of adopting this Old Testament ideology, when really the original religion was from Athens to Judea as the Logos, which fulfilled all the Logos fulfills all the prophecies and all the teachings in the Old Testament. It's all fulfilled by the Logos, and you don't need anything else. It's the Logos only. You don't need anything else. When you have the Logos, you can live a virtuous life. When you have the Logos, you don't get involved in criminality and all these evil, vile types of behaviors that are being pushed by the Talmudists that are ruling over us in Europe. And whether it's all the pornography and the perversion and the sodomy and the war and the genocide and the bloodthirsty bloodletting and extermination of all these populations and the lockdowns and the police state, it's all That's all. That is the Semitic system. That is the system of the rabbis, and it's all foreign to us because what we're rooted in, our eternal capital is not Jerusalem. Our eternal capital is